Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. So we finally got the long-awaited ban and restriction update, and while it doesn't necessarily seem like this is going to be that impactful of an update because we literally only got one card added and the hit wasn't a flat-out ban, it was a limit down to one, this is still going to have a huge impact on how we're going to be approaching the game going forward, because this is affecting the current best deck in BT11, and on top of that, it's also going to be affecting some decks in BT12 and EX4 as well as potentially BT13. So this is going to change how we're going to be approaching the game, because what we perceived as the best deck no longer has the ability to be able to potentially be the best deck because of what this card was doing. So as far as what the ban and limitation actually is, it's going to take place on April 1st is when this restriction is going to happen. So if you're planning on playing in any regionals, then this will be affecting how you play regionals and what you're going to possibly see during that regional season. Then as far as what the card is, it is Greymon X Antibody. So this is the BT11 version of Greymon X Antibody, and the description on why they decided to hit the card is that the effect of reducing the cost of when digivolving effects from this card to a Digimon that has Greymon in its name allows you to digivolve into BT12 Metal Greymon or BT9 Metal Greymon a little too efficiently, accelerating the speed at which the deck reduces the opponent's security and comeback potential. Additionally, this card's inheritable effect gives resistances to a number of different effects and overall increases the effectiveness of Greymon-based decks more than expected. Therefore, we determined that this narrows the range of viable decks in the format, and we've decided to restrict the card to one copy per deck. So as far as my own personal feelings and take on the ban and restriction, I think that this was definitely a needed restriction, especially since we know based on Japanese data and results that red-black Greymon-based decks are not going away anytime soon and are still one of the best decks even now in the Japanese format. And part of that problem does come down to Greymon X Antibody's ability to accelerate the deck. As far as the level of acceleration, it is on that higher threshold side, which is why cards like Jet Sylphimon and Argamon level 5 initially got hit to begin with, because of the speed it was providing those types of decks that they were playing with to be able to outpace and outtempo the opponent, being able to get up to their level 6 to respond to the opponent's threats, putting them at a huge advantage, and Greymon X Antibody is providing that for not only just the Black War Greymon deck and War Greymon X Antibody that we currently are playing with in BT11, but in the future as well, because we do get more War Greymon and Black War Greymon support. So as far as taking a look at what we actually get in BT12, we do get a whole new evolution line of red and black Greymons that's going to be going into your Greymon deck, making it even more powerful than it's ever been. So as far as going over some of the low-end cards really quickly, we have the Agumon that's going to be another generic DP booster during all turns, which is pretty good because we always want to try to make sure that our Digimon are stronger than the opponents, both offensively and defensively. Then it's also going to be another searching or digging tool to increase the deck's overall consistency. Then on top of that, we get a new Greymon that's going to help us play our Tamer, which actually could matter because our Tamer is already really powerful. So we could even go from a raising play of going from a level 3 all the way up to our level 6 for very little memory because of the combination of cards that we could be playing with, and this card just helps enable that type of combo play even more. Then on top of that, it has that same DP boost ability that we just saw with our Agumon to ensure that our Digimon is going to be as strong as it possibly can at all times. But the main reason why they stated that the card is going to be limited is we already knew how powerful the BT9 Metal Greymon is, but the big difference between the BT9 Metal Greymon and the BT12 Metal Greymon is the fact that the BT9 Metal Greymon will always cost 4, so with the effect to reduce the Digivolution cost for each color, that means it's going to be 2 to Evo, which is a little bit more on par compared to some of the other best decks in the game. But as far as what we get with the BT12 Metal Greymon, the fact that he actually is going to be costing 1 to Evo is what's making the acceleration as powerful as it seems, just because we're not actually going to be paying 4 to Digivolve into this card. We're always going to be Digivolving it on top of a Greymon, and it's not just specifically Greymon, it's Greymon in its name, so this works with Greymon X Antibody, and because he's 2 colors, that means, again, with that cost reduction of 2, it's going to be 1 to Evo. Then if we used a Greymon or just already had a tie set up on our field, or we even had a Cool Boy set up on our field, then we effectively are basically Digivolving for 0 into our level 5, which is just really powerful and tempo efficient just because we already know how strong our level 6s can be in anything Greymon related. And then on top of that, he has a slew of really powerful abilities to best synergize with how the deck wants to play, both offensively and defensively. And then on top of that, we do get another War Greymon to really flesh out and round out what the deck is capable of. So you would use this obviously with a War Greymon X Antibody, or you could just throw it in as a tech card for your Black War Greymon deck. It really starts to give you a lot of different options, especially because they're all playing with very similar cores and bases, with the only real change coming from the ratios, the tamers, maybe the options, and the level 6s, which isn't actually a larger portion of what a deck generally consists of. And then on top of that, as I mentioned before, in EX4, we do get some more Black War Greymon support, or I guess more specifically Gaiomon support. So not only do you have War Greymon, you have Black War Greymon, and now you have Gaiomon as 3 possible variants to be able to play all of the same cards, allowing these 3 decks to be able to perform above most other decks, all because of the acceleration and protection that Greymon X Antibody from BT11 is providing. Then on top of that, as I already stated, we do have a new Tai Kamiya that also is going to be making our cards as efficient as it possibly can be to evolve into our higher stages, just because when we evolve, we basically get to suspend the tamer to be able to gain a memory, thus allowing our Greymon that we just saw to be able to play this Tai, and then basically Evo on top into our Greymon X Antibody. If we have a Cool Boy, then we get to gain a memory and draw a card for Evoing in, so it was like we only Evoed for 1 into that Greymon. Then we get to play this card, Evo into our Metal Greymon, which we already know is going to cost 1 to Evo. Then with this tie, it's going to basically make it free to Evo. So we essentially went from our rookie all the way up into our level 5 for effectively nothing. And then we're just going to be going into whatever level 6 you're going to be playing on top of that. And then because everything already is 2 colors, it allows us to be able to customize whatever low end we want to be playing, just because of how all of the colored Digivolutions work, and name-based Digivolutions allowing us to ignore their colors almost entirely at this point. So there's just a lot of customization and flexibility that these Greymon-based decks have. And then on top of that, you also have some indirect Greymons that could take advantage of this card. So if you really wanted to, in a, let's just say, a Rise Greymon-based deck or a Shine Greymon deck, then we still can take advantage of Greymon X Antibody, just because it's playing around with Greymons that want to be 2 or more colors. So even though we're not Digivolving for 3 on top of a Geo Greymon, we're Digivolving for 2 on top of a Greymon X Antibody, which is ultimately more efficient to Digivolve into, to be able to get into our higher stages more effective than what the card normally would allow, or what its design and intention was allowing us to do to begin with. But the cool thing about this limitation is the fact that we still are able to play our Greymon-based decks, and this doesn't necessarily kill the deck outright. It just slows it down to a more reasonable or normal level. So as far as functional replacements go, the best functional replacement for Greymon X Antibody is, well, with Greymon X Antibody. The BT9 one is still a Greymon X Antibody, which is going to have lots of good native synergy with the deck, on top of the fact that it's still having that protection type of ability as a good inheritable. It's just doing it a little bit differently. And then if you want to try to lose the protection and risk some consistency, we still do have the promo Deltamon if you really care about that speed to be able to reduce the cost of our Digivolutions into multicolored cards, so you don't necessarily retain as much speed as you once had. It's just a good functional replacement if you care about that speed to begin with. So to reiterate on my thoughts a little bit, some people might not realize that these bans and limitations are more Japanese focused, where they had more time to play with these cards than we do, which is why sometimes these decisions don't necessarily seem like they make a whole lot of sense. So for us, while we only had one big tournament for each of the different English-speaking regions, and only about 1 month to play with a card like Greymon X Antibody, Japan had months to play with the card, and it's still a problem there. Thus, part of the reason why they're limiting the card now is because of how much of a problem it is for them. Then this has always been the case, and it still seems to be the case going forward. So while I do think that there was more that they could have hit in terms of trying to balance things more for the English format, they're not necessarily as concerned about that because cards like Cool Boy, decks like Grandis and Melga are seeing less play in Japan, thus are less likely to actually get hit. Then the intention here again was to slow down these Greymon-based decks like Black War Greymon X Antibody, as they said, and again we're soon going to be seeing a new War Greymon deck and a splintered Gaiomon deck, creating their own various different decks to be able to keep red-black Greymons alive. BT11 Greymon X Antibody not only is good for adding protection, but making Digivolving even cheaper to make it easier to go up into their level 6 to basically shut the opponent out of the game. Then on top of that, even in BT13, as I kind of already pointed out with the Rise example, there's still possible decks in the future that could abuse Greymon X Antibody that are also Greymon related, but not directly related to the main intention on how Greymon X Antibody was supposed to be used. And I know this was, again, a little bit on the light side when it comes to bans and limitations, but this was probably due to them trying to play it again on the safe side, because BT12, RB1, and EX4 in Japan were all really short formats, so there was less data to collect to be able to flesh out a ban and restriction list even more. On top of the fact that they were also hosting their Beelzemon Cup, which was a monocolored event, taking away from some of the actual data to be able to make it proper assessments on what should be banned and limited. And then I do understand that the English meta and Japanese meta are completely different, and while I would like to see an English exclusive ban and restriction list, I don't necessarily think that's going to happen, and it's easier for them to not do that, because what is a problem now might not be a problem later, and this is them trying to play that wait-and-see approach in terms of what's actually a problem or not. But for now, we're still operating under the same ban and restriction list as Japan, and the only thing that we could gauge off of Japanese data right now is the dominance of these Greymon-based decks throughout the different formats. Of course, whenever a card is banned or limited, changes to the deck will be needed to be made, but that's okay because we do have two decent substitutions to think about utilizing. And again, the goal was to bring it down in terms of its speed to put it more on par with some of the slower decks. And as we've seen in the past, decks that move too fast to get up into their big level 6 has always been a problem for the game, because that just allows those decks to be able to outpace the opponent and give them more possible time to be able to react and respond, putting them at a huge advantage compared to the slower decks that actually have the lack of ability to be able to react and respond as a result of the difference in their speed. So we don't know the full ramifications and impact this change will have on the BT11 meta and on future metas, but there will be a huge shift leading us into some slightly unknown territories, which some people find fun, not always walking into a solved or mostly solved meta. And then on top of that, I think people's feelings are more negative due to the lack that more cards could have been hit, especially when they alluded to possible cards getting hit thanks to the Ultimate Cup alternative rules. And the announcement of an announcement for this ban and restriction list wasn't necessarily doing them any justice, trying to build unnecessary hype up for this eventual drop. And sure, they also could have delayed this limitation to take effect when BT12 comes out, but I think based on the Nationals results, with Greymon having such a large play rate and a large win rate, this is definitely going to be shaking things up even more to try to make the rest of BT11 more enjoyable, rather than just always seeing Black War Greymon everywhere. And then what is a problem in Japan is also likely to continue to be a problem for us, so there are some parallels between us and Japan, even though our formats are a little bit different. So it's not like these bans are actually trying to harm our format, it's actually trying to save our format from being as, in quotation marks, bad as it was in Japan, again to try to increase our overall enjoyment of the game. But that's just my take and my perspective, trying to stay in a more positive mindset, and I still like the decision that they ultimately made here, and I don't disagree with it in the slightest. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.